What are you going to do for fantasy football this year? How are you going to draft, and who are you planning to draft? Let's talk about that a little bit. You often, and I've done this, many years, um, you, often want to draft like a really good tight end very, very early, and then also a quarterback like really, really early. Well, um, that might not be the best strategy out there. So I'm actually here to tell you from experience uh, that doesn't typically work all the time. Um, I will tell you from experience that I have not made, the playoffs very many times doing that. Another thing that, you know, I can tell you is, drafting a wide receiver first round. Um, Now, yes, you can, but like that's probably not the greatest move to draft a quarterback or a wide receiver, pardon me, wide receiver first round. Um, Typically, you might want to think about, because think about this, there's, once you get down to the fourth or fifth round, yeah, there's still running backs available, but not any running backs that I can think of that you would want to start every single week. Meaning, you kind of would want to look at, the stats and, just look at who would be a better matchup. Uh, Once start, like getting way down in there, like fifth, sixth round, maybe fourth, but like you can still draft a pretty decent running back in the fourth round. But what I have found is any running backs later than that, you're looking at, you're really looking at matchups, to decide who to put in, and not that you can't draft a running back in those, later rounds, because you're gonna need them on your bench. But I have found it is really, really, it really helps your fantasy team when you take running backs earlier, a lot earlier. In fact, take a running back first round. You can double down on taking running backs first and second round if you want to. That might be a really good strategy. If you do that, the only problem that I see is that you would have to take three receivers in a row. And I'm not really huge on taking, three receivers right, boom, boom, boom. Like I like to, I might take like maybe two receivers, back to back, but I'm not typically a person that likes to take so many receivers right back to back to back. And then the same with running backs. But I'm all right uh, with taking back to back running backs. The first, especially, learning, from past years, you know, it's very crucial to get your running backs, your two starting running backs, and then um like, so first round for sure, you should be looking for a running back, like a top of the tier running back. Well, what do you do if you're drafting, late in the first round, or in the mid of the first round? I, in the past, have always thought that, it just depends on where you're drafting at in the first round, would determine whether you take a receiver or a running back. I have changed my thoughts on that because, I have since learned that, maybe that's not necessarily the best strategy. I don't care where you're at in the first round. Probably best to take a running back. Yeah, you're going to miss out on some really good receivers, but you know what? Receivers are everywhere in the NFL. You can grab, really good receivers still in the second round. You don't necessarily have to grab Lamar or Jamar Chase. You don't have to, get somebody like that. He's really good, and you can, but then you definitely have to, if you're going to do that, you definitely have to take back-to-back running backs the second round and third round. And what is the problem with that? The problem with that is you're missing out on these other receivers that could have been there for you in the second and third round, because it all goes to, what I have learned. It goes back to what I've learned. Get your first, two running backs, right off the get-go, and you're going to be, fairly decent. That doesn't mean that you have to go back-to-back running backs, but because, again, if you go back-to-back running backs, you got to take three receivers right there. And then if you take the problem with taking the receiver in the first round, you're going to have, in order for you to get the running backs that you want on your roster, that's going to, get you to the playoffs, the best chance of making the playoffs, you're going to have to go back to back, which is fine, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily the best strategy. That's still a pretty good strategy, but it's just not the strategy that I would want to do, because then after that you're doubling down on receivers. And so I would take a running back first round, and again, you can take a running back second round if you want, but I wouldn't, because the problem is you're going to have to, so take a running back first round, a receiver second round, and a receiver third round, and then go back to the running back position and get your second running back. So that way you have one running back that is top of the line, that is definitely going to be consistent, getting you fantasy points week in and week out. You should have two receivers that are, consistent. Maybe they're not Jamar Chase. Maybe they're not like anybody from the, like as good as the first round, but they should be at least two receivers that you now have that you can rely on week in and week out. And then your second running back that you take fourth round, yes, there might be a little bit of he's going to be consistent, but he might not be as consistent as the running back that you take in the first round. I get it. But hey, for your second running back, that's actually still not a bad deal. To have a fourth round running back, because look, there's going to be plenty of running backs still available fourth round, and yeah, they might not be. You might have 1 week here and there that you might, put in another, based on matchup, but for the majority of the season, like still the fourth or your second running back drafted fourth round is still going to be, more consistent than a fifth round running back or sixth round running back. And so then fifth and sixth, you can go back to possibly go back to receivers, but or you can go fourth round running back, fifth round running back, and then draft a receiver, and then maybe seventh or eighth round get your quarterback. Now, yes, you want to, you gotta know who you're drafting with. There's leagues out there that overvalue players and undervalue players. There's leagues that draft quarterbacks, that will draft, quarterbacks first round, second round, that will draft, tight ends, first round, second round, third round, and so you kind of have to know, like who you're drafting with. Like, you got to know your league. That is one thing that I will emphasize, that you must know your league. Now, you still don't want to take a tight end and a quarterback early, but I've heard where you want to try to take a quarterback eighth round and try to take your tight end below the eighth round. However, it gets kind of hard. I can understand it gets kind of hard if you're in a league that really likes to take quarterbacks early and tight ends early. Now, as far as your tight end goes, I probably wouldn't worry too much about your, like if they want to take a elite tight end early, let them. I'm more concerned about the quarterbacks, because if you're in a league, there's only so many like really good quarterbacks, and then in some leagues, by the time you I understand by the time you get to like the 8th round, who is left but CJ Stroud or Jordan Love, which those aren't bad quarterbacks for fantasy, but they're not as consistent. They're definitely not, consistent enough for you to put them in every single week. And so, you don't necessarily need to get like a Josh Allen or a Joe Burrow like I thought in years past. But you definitely should look at, trying to get Dak Prescott. You should look at trying to get Baker Mayfield, or, you should try to, at least try to get Bo Nix, because those three quarterbacks I have noticed, they're not going to be as consistent as, Joe Burrow and, the top tier quarterbacks, but they're still going to be consistent enough. And you're gonna just have to go to the waiver wire, some weeks, for quarterbacks. But if you draft, somebody like a Bo Nix or a Dak Prescott or, a Sam Darnold, you're still going to the waiver wire, but maybe not as often. If you're in a league that drafts heavy on quarterbacks and you wait too long, you're drafting a quarterback that you really don't want. Because now, not saying that you can't, go to the waiver wire, week to week, every single week to drop a quarterback, pick one up, based on the matchup. But it gets very, very, you can draw a lot of headaches that way. And I've noticed you can be your worst enemy at times when you go to the waiver wire. When you do that, sometimes you can be your own worst enemy, thinking that a quarterback is going to be good for this week, and you should have kept the one that you had on your roster. Or, just, or you find yourself getting rid of players for quarterbacks that are on the waiver wire, so that way you end up with three. Like, maybe you draft one, but then you get rid of, other players for, I've done that before, and that's a mistake. Because then you have like 3 or 4, quarterbacks on your roster, and you don't know which one to play each week. It's better, like, if you draft only one quarterback, it's better to draft, late in the round. So you just go to the waiver wire and pick up a quarterback. But again, sometimes when you're in a league that drafts heavy and quarterbacks, it's like early, it's hard to know where to, take your one and only quarterback that you're going to take, and then just, kind of go to the waiver wire whenever they have a bye week. And then, because, like, also there's leagues that love to hoard onto quarterbacks, that and I'm talking about quarterbacks that should be in the waiver, but they're not there because your league that you're in is hoarding all of the, good quarterbacks that should be on the waiver wire that you should be able to pick up week to week. And you can run into that problem as well. And yeah, I've been in, those leagues before where they just hoard quarterbacks, and I'm talking about quarterbacks that should be in the waiver, that are not there because they're hoarding quarterbacks. And I've been in a situation before where I'm trying to trade, I'm trying to, trade for a quarterback, or, trade a quarterback for, whatever. And it just seems like you're the laughing stock of your league. Well, I think some people in leagues know that. They know that if they can hoard quarterbacks, they know that they can get, some people desperate enough for a quarterback to try to trade, to try to do a trade for a quarterback. Sometimes it really is, they just want to hoard quarterbacks because they, which is ridiculous, because that the waiver wire is right there. Why do you need to hoard on to so many quarterbacks if the waiver wire is right there? You can go to the waiver wire. It like hoarding quarterbacks keeps the league. That's one of the reasons why, if your league isn't going to the waiver wire a whole lot, that could be one of the reasons, is because your league is hoarding quarterbacks. Like, literally, they might have 3 to 4, maybe even 5 quarterbacks on one team. And so, to be honest, if you're in a league like that, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. If I did, I would have an answer for myself. What does a person that's on a league like that do? Do you try to hoard quarterbacks like everybody else, or do you stick to your game plan and, draft one quarterback and just go to the waiver wire, and so, if I had an answer for you, I would have an answer for myself. And I don't have an answer for myself, so I don't have an answer for you, which is kind of sad. But it's all, kind of comes down to paying attention to the league that you're in. Do they hoard quarterbacks? Do they draft one quarterback in during the draft and then go out and, grab a whole bunch of quarterbacks in the waiver and start hoarding quarterbacks? Or do they draft multiple quarterbacks and hoard that way? It just all depends on what your league does. That will kind of determine how you draft, and what you do during the season, whether or not you go to the waiver wire as many times as you would like, or but hopefully I was able to give you a few tips. Definitely first 4 to 5 rounds, if you can, hold off and get a quarterback 6th, 7th, or even 8th round, if you can. Um, I understand that there's leagues that are quarterback, happy. They love to get their quarterbacks early, and so you just kind of have to, play it by ear or by what's going on in the draft. I understand. Um, but that would be my best advice is, try to stay away from quarterbacks the first, you know, 5 rounds if possible. And also stay away from tight ends until the eighth or below the 8th round. That would be my best advice. In this video, I'm not going to go over, who would be, a number one draft pick, a number two draft pick, and, things like that. That would be for another video, but I hopefully gave you some good advice.